My great-grandmother was very close friends with Mackenzie King, and she was a spiritualist. And they used to have seances. And so she would speak to her dead husband, and he would speak to his dead mother. It made me think that these kinds of things were possible and that they were real, and you know, the idea that you could feel dead people around you.
When you open the door to a ghost as a child, does it ever close? Or do early experiences set you up to have paranormal encounters for the rest of your life? Hello, I'm Lawrence Chow. Welcome to Ghostly Encounters. Today, we'll look at that early childhood connection. We'll meet two women who talk about relationships with the supernatural that began in childhood and continued throughout their lives. Both tell of encounters that seem to reveal a spiritual universe that's a lot like our day-to-day world. These include some experiences that are frightening and others that are merely unsettling or uncomfortable. Charlotte Disher grew up in a family environment of spiritualism and seances, of people saying they were communicating with the dead. With a genetic and environmental heritage like that, it was only to be expected that Charlotte would have a strong affinity for the supernatural.
I started having dreams when I was a child, dreams that came true. So it wasn't that I predicted, you know, big things, there were little things, but it started to scare me. And the last one that I remember having was when I was about 17. My horse was pregnant, and she was a thoroughbred. She'd been a racehorse. So she was very fine-boned and slight, and this was her first pregnancy. And the reason that we were breeding her is because she had broken her leg. It had healed, but I couldn't ride her anymore. I had a dream that she went into labor and that she had twins, and we didn't know that she was having twins. And she was a dark bay, and the first foal got stuck. It died when they were trying to pull it out, and then because the second one couldn't get out and couldn't breathe, obviously, it died. The next day, when I woke up, my parents told me that my horse had gone into labor and that she'd had twins and that they'd both died. But when they told me that, I mean, I was so upset. And I asked them, you know, what the foals were and stuff, and they said a dark bay and a gray. And my dream, and so I told them my dream. And my dream was exactly what happened. I was both upset by what had happened with my horse, but also I was terrified that I'd had this dream because it was so clear, and it was, you know, it had all the detail, and also I was scared because it involved death. You know, these creatures died, and I knew it ahead of time. How could I have predicted that? How did I know that happened in exactly that detail? How is that possible? I had no idea. Once there was a connection between the dream and reality and something happening, you stop wanting to tell people because you think that people aren't going to believe you. And as you get older, you become aware of that, and you become embarrassed, or you just don't want you don't want to look like an idiot. I started to realize, I think, at that point that there was something happening there. There was something real happening, and so I just made a decision. I just shut it off. So they went away, and so it was a long time before I had a visitation, as I call it.
Charlotte was troubled by her ability to predict the future in her dreams, and so for many years she just shut it off. But 20 years ago, when she was visiting friends and family in New York City, the part of her life she wanted to ignore reappeared in a far more terrifying form.
I was in a room on the top floor, which was kind of like, it wasn't the attic, but it was under the roof, you know. And the building was old. It was built sometime in the 1800s. And I had gone to bed, and I had just turned the lights off. And this thing was hovering, all of a sudden hovering over me. And it was black, and I knew right away it was malevolent. I just felt complete malevolence and perhaps violence or something. I don't know. It was terrifying. I was terrified. Anyway, I turned on the light, and it was gone. It just, poof, was gone. And so I turned on all the lights, and I went into the bath. I looked everywhere. I, opened closets. I looked under the bed. Then I went into the bathroom, and I turned on the light, and there was a trap door in the ceiling. And I thought, oh my God, what's up there? That must be the attic, and that's where it must have come from there. There was no face on it. It was nothing recognizable to me. It was otherworldly. It wasn't human. I hadn't, I don't think I'd experienced anything like that. If I had for a very long time, I had no thought of it. I didn't go to bed with any thought of it. I didn't feel creeped out by the room or the building or anything, It was like a cozy room, and so when that happened, I was terrified. It's always made me feel that I should be careful about it. And I don't know if that's because I just, because I'm worried about what other people will think, or I'm worried about me getting caught up in it and where that might lead. So I guess part of me is maybe a bit skeptical too.
Despite her caution, despite her skepticism, Charlotte's link to the supernatural is so strong that it won't be denied. She tells of another ghostly encounter, but this time it's in the bedroom of her own home, and this time it's not an event remembered from years past.
About a month ago now, I think, I was asleep, and I don't know at what point I woke up. All of a sudden, there was this white figure over my bed, and it was pulling back the covers. So I just was, again, I just like leapt out of my skin. And I was trying, it was that thing when you're just kind of half awake and half asleep, and I was trying to scream. And every time I tried, a little bit of noise would come out, and it'd get louder and louder. And as I did that, this creature would just move back towards the door, and I finally was able to scream full out loud, and it just went out the door. I didn't feel it was out to do anything to me. I didn't feel like it was malevolent or violent or anything like that. But it just, because it woken me up in bed, I was terrified. So I got up again, turned on all the lights, went all through the house, upstairs, downstairs, closets, you name it. And nothing was there, it was gone. The scientist in me would like to explain these things, but my other side is just, no, this happened. I felt it. Emotionally, I felt it. I experienced it. And as far as I'm concerned, it was real.
Charlotte believes she has had encounters with the supernatural since childhood. This connection troubles her, but it seems strong enough to continue throughout her life. Supernatural beings of all types have been reported for centuries from around the world. Most of these entities from the other side seem to be disembodied humans. Charlotte's visitors didn't appear in human form, but our experts caution us to not make too much of that, because if there is a spirit world, deception may be as much a part of that universe as it is a part of our daily life. And so there is no guarantee that presences that appeared to Charlotte were in fact what they seemed.
We used to go for a Sunday drive all the time. My dad would pile us in the car and we would go for a Sunday drive. And one time we went and we were coming into a town and there was a bridge and a dry kind of riverbed. And then across on the other side of the bridge was an old barn on the left-hand side, an old faded red barn with faded white letters. Just before we're crossing the bridge, I was in the back seat with my sister, I had a vision of this two people in a horse carriage. There was a woman, a young woman, late teens, early 20s, and an older man. And, she was in old style clothes with a little sack purse, kind of on her wrist. And the bridge was a wooden bridge. It was the same scene, but newer. And it was a wooden bridge. And, the riverbed was, it was like, must have been spring, because it was muddy and the water was churning and it was flowing really quickly. And as this couple crossed the bridge in their horse-drawn carriage, the bridge collapsed. And, they perished, they died. And I kind of freaked out in the car, and I was, crying and telling my dad to stop the car, not to go over the bridge. And, of course he thought I was, didn't have a clue what was going on. And he drove across the bridge and stopped and turned around, was angry, and was like, what's going on back there? And, and then I felt a little foolish because we had crossed the bridge and everything was fine. But the vision was just so vivid that, I really had a sense of despair and fear. That vision has never really faded. Like, it's always been very clear. The details are, as clear as that time. And so I had gone and I did some research, and there was some old archives that I was managed to find, and in it was a picture of this place that I had seen, the bridge, the barn on the other side. And I did a search, and sure enough had found that there was one spring that was, I guess it had been a hard winter, and the spring runoff was, fiercer than normal. So the river was really swollen. So when this couple crossed, the bridge collapsed and they were swept away. It was a revelation to be able to confirm that it was a little satisfying and frightening at the same time.
Tamara Shires tells us she was just 9 years old when she had her vision on the bridge. Like Charlotte, her connection to the supernatural started in childhood. And like Charlotte, Tamara's early experience did not involve the appearance of a spirit or ghost. There's an important difference between these two incidents. Charlotte's dream took her into the future, while Tamara's vision took her into the past. In the physical world, all we have is the present. The past is lived through memory and oral or written history. The future is yet to be. But Charlotte and Tamara's stories imply that in a supernatural world, past and future can actually be experienced in the present. It is some years later now. Tamara and her high school friends decide to have a seance. Her connection to the supernatural will be tested, and their teenage enthusiasm is about to lead to a dramatic encounter with a force they think comes from beyond.
So we all went down in the basement, and we're going to do this seance. And, we had been goofing around with the tape recorder. So we decided to tape the seance. And, there was a lot of giggling going on, and, we ask a question and then somebody would snicker. So it really, like, the atmosphere wasn't serious at all. So, but we'd asked for a sign, called the spirits, and then asked for a sign of their presence. And at that moment, the candle flame, like, very distinctly went down and up and down like 3 times. And at that point, I felt extremely uncomfortable. Like, I was feeling sick to my stomach. I just wanted to go home. Like, at that moment, I was just like, I want to go home. And, kind of fearing ridicule from my friends that, I was affected this way. I jumped up, turned the light on, made some kind of joke, and, the moment passed. And, we kind of said, okay, well, let's listen to the tape. So we played back the recording, and, we're laughing at ourselves. And then at the point where the candle flickered, all we heard was the 3 claps. So at that point, like, we all, screamed, ran upstairs, and, had lots to talk about for the next couple of weeks.
Life goes on for Tamara. She's now a devoted mother with a young child. But despite these changes, Tamara's ghostly encounters continue. Only now, to her dismay, her young son is involved.
We lived in an apartment building, and I had a really long hallway. And he was always really reluctant to go to his room. And at first I just took it up, that he didn't want to go to bed. What child does want to go to bed? So I ignored him half the time. But then he started saying the man. He didn't like the man. And I, would ask him, well, what man? And he's like, the bad man. I don't like the bad man. So, and it kind of, it concerned me, because it was a repetitive thing. Like, it was every time he was going to the end of the hall where his bedroom was, he would cry and talk about the bad man. And I went with a girlfriend of mine once, and we had gone to see a psychic. And, that whole experience was not, I wasn't impressed. It wasn't like I all of a sudden became a believer. I actually doubted her abilities. And then she turned and out of the blue said to me, and this is before, like, we hadn't discussed whether I had children, what sex my child or children were. And then she turned to me out of the blue and said, there's a presence in your home that's disturbing your son. You have to tell them to go, because it's extremely disturbing to him. That kind of, gave me goosebumps. So she said to smudge the house. So I went home, and that's exactly what I did. Smudging is something that the natives do. It's a purification. The essence being that, the smoke will carry away bad spirits and cleanse the place. After that, there was never another incident with my son. There was never, it was all of a sudden like, a light switched, and there was no more fear.
Both Tamara and Charlotte began seeing ghosts when they were kids. These incidents have continued throughout their lives. Their experiences suggest we have some control over what happens during these moments. Charlotte decided she didn't want to keep dreaming about future events, and so she shut it off. When Tamara realized something was disturbing her son, she smudged her apartment. That seemed to drive away the presence in her home. It's thought-provoking to see how calmly these women were able to relate the stories of their frightening encounters. Perhaps one of the reasons for their matter-of-fact manner is that they both believe these experiences would be far more common for all of us if we'd only let them happen.
All I know is that there aren't just, there aren't just 3 dimensions out there. There's something else, and I think if you allow yourself to be open to these things, and I think most people would experience them or could experience them, but they don't want, they don't believe in that kind of stuff, or they don't want to, or they just think it's crazy, or
I've never been one to be like afraid. Like I always would say, well, if there's a UFO, well, come visit me, and if there's a ghost sighting, well, come hang out with me. So I think maybe it was just, and I think once you're more open to it, I think then it comes.